Sign it now, Gabriella, before we change our minds about letting you marry our son. My future mother-in-law Diane pushed the prenuptial agreement across the mahogany conference table in their Greenwich estate, her diamond rings catching the chandelier light. Behind her, my fiancé Thomas sat silent, avoiding my eyes, while his father Richard smirked with the confidence of old money dismissing new nothing. What they didn't know was that the very table we sat at, the estate surrounding us, and every asset they were so carefully protecting, I held the mortgage on all of it. The family meeting had been called for 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Thomas had warned me the night before, his voice apologetic but resigned. Mom wants to discuss the prenup. Dad's lawyer drafted something. Just sign it, Gabby. It doesn't matter. I love you regardless. But it did matter. It mattered that after dating for 2 years after Thomas proposed on a beach in Maui with a ring his grandmother wore. After planning a wedding for 200 guests, his family still saw me as a gold digger who brought nothing to the union. Now I sat in their library surrounded by leather-bound books they probably never read and artwork they purchased for status rather than love while they explained why I needed to sign away any claim to the Hartwell fortune. Let me be clear, Richard said, leaning back in his chair like a king addressing a peasant. Thomas is heir to Hartwell Industries. When we die, he'll inherit this estate, the business, the investment portfolios. We've worked for 40 years to build this wealth. We're not about to let some, he paused, choosing his words carefully, elementary school teacher walk away with half of it after a few years of marriage. Dad, Thomas protested weakly. That's not fair. It's perfectly fair, Diane interrupted. Gabriella, I'm sure you're a lovely girl. Thomas clearly cares about you. But facts are facts. You make $52,000 a year teaching second grade. You live in a rented apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Toyota. You bring no assets to this marriage. She brings herself, Thomas said, finding a bit of spine. That's enough for me. Sentiment is lovely, darling, but it doesn't protect family wealth, Diane said, her voice sugary with condescension. Gabriella, you must understand. We're not saying you're a bad person. We're saying you're marrying up significantly. This prenup simply protects what Thomas has built, well, what we've built for him. I looked at the document in front of me. 23 pages of legal language that boiled down to one message: you're worth nothing. You get nothing. Sign here. My attorney, Margaret Soto, sat beside me, her expression carefully neutral. She reviewed the prenup earlier that week and called it one of the most one-sided agreements I've seen in 30 years of practice. She'd also laughed when she saw who was proposing it. May I speak with my client privately? Margaret asked. Is that necessary? Richard frowned. It's a standard prenup. She signs, we move forward with wedding planning. Simple. Mr. Hartwell, Ms. Rodriguez is entitled to legal counsel before signing any binding document. Fine. 5 minutes. We'll wait outside. The Hartwells filed out, Thomas throwing me an apologetic look. When the door closed, Margaret turned to me with barely suppressed amusement. Are you going to tell them? She asked quietly. Not yet, I said. I want to see how far they'll go. Gabby, they're offering you nothing. No spousal support, no claim to marital assets acquired during the marriage, no provision for children. I know. And you're still going to sign it? I'm considering it. Margaret shook her head. Your call. But when this blows up, and it will blow up, I want to be there to see their faces. The Hartwells returned, Diane carrying a tray with coffee and croissants as if this were a pleasant social gathering rather than a financial ambush. Have you made your decision? Richard asked, settling back into his throne-like chair. I have a few questions first, I said calmly. Of course, Diane said with practiced patience. We want you to understand everything. The prenup specifies that I have no claim to any Hartwell assets, including this estate. Is that correct? Correct, Richard confirmed. This property has been in our family for 30 years. It's worth approximately $4.2 million. Obviously, we can't risk losing it in a divorce. Obviously, I agreed. And Hartwell Industries? Thomas's inheritance of the company? Also protected, Richard said. The business is worth roughly $87 million. It will pass to Thomas and remain solely his property regardless of marital status. What about the investment portfolio mentioned in Section 7? Diane smiled. That's our retirement portfolio. $12 million in stocks, bonds, and real estate investments. We've worked very hard for that security, Gabriella. You understand why we need to protect it. I do understand, I said. One more question. What happens if something changes in your financial situation? If you were to face unexpected difficulties? Richard laughed, a sharp bark of amusement. Unexpected difficulties? The Hartwells have been financially sound for 3 generations. We don't have difficulties. But theoretically, I pressed. If circumstances changed, would the prenup change? The prenup is ironclad, Richard said firmly. Nothing changes it. You sign it, you're bound by it forever. That's the point. I see. I looked at Thomas, who was studying his hands. Thomas, is this really what you want? He finally met my eyes. Gabby, I love you. But they're my parents. This is their condition for giving us their blessing and paying for the wedding. If we don't sign, they'll cut me off entirely. Cut you off, I repeated. From what, exactly? Everything, Diane interjected. Thomas works for Hartwell Industries because we gave him that position. He lives in the penthouse apartment because we purchased it. His car, his country club membership, his lifestyle, all provided by us. If he defies us on this prenup, all of that ends. I turned to Margaret. In your professional opinion, should I sign this? Margaret's eyes gleamed. Oh, I think we should discuss what you'd be signing away first. May I? Please. Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a different folder. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, I've reviewed your prenuptial agreement thoroughly. I've also reviewed my client's financial disclosure, which she's required to provide as part of any prenuptial process. I think you should see it before Ms. Rodriguez signs anything. Why? Richard frowned. She's a schoolteacher. We know her finances. Do you? Margaret slid a document across the table. This is Ms. Rodriguez's current net worth statement, prepared by her accounting firm last month. Diane picked it up, her eyes scanning the page. Her face went pale. This can't be right. What? Richard grabbed the paper. What does it say? It says, Diane whispered, that Gabriella is worth $127 million. The room went completely silent. Thomas looked up sharply. What? There must be a mistake, Richard said, but his voice had lost its confidence. It shows ownership of something called Rodriguez Capital Management. That's my private equity firm, I said calmly. I founded it 8 years ago after graduating from Wharton Business School. We specialize in distressed asset acquisition and restructuring. Wharton? Diane repeated faintly. But you teach second grade. I volunteer at my old elementary school 3 mornings a week, I corrected. I teach reading to underserved students. It's important to me to give back to the community where I grew up. But it's not my career. Your career is private equity? Thomas was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Yes. Rodriguez Capital manages approximately $340 million in assets. My personal stake is worth about $127 million. We focus on acquiring undervalued properties and struggling businesses, rehabilitating them, and either operating them long-term or selling them at profit. Richard was still reading the financial statement, his hands shaking slightly. This lists holdings in real estate, corporate debt, and mortgage notes. Yes. We acquired a portfolio of residential mortgage notes 2 years ago from a bank that was liquidating assets. Very good terms. The mortgages were all current, just undervalued in the market. Margaret was smiling now. Mr. Hartwell, if you look at page 3, you'll see a detailed list of those mortgage notes. Richard flipped pages. He stopped. His face went gray. What? Diane grabbed the document. What is it? One of the mortgages, Richard said slowly, is on 47, Lakeside Drive, Greenwich, Connecticut. This address? That's correct, I confirmed. Your mortgage was part of that portfolio acquisition. I've held the note on your estate for 23 months. The silence was deafening. You own our mortgage? Diane's voice was barely audible. The bank that originally financed your home sold the mortgage to a larger institution, which packaged it with others and sold the package to my firm. So yes, technically, you make your monthly mortgage payments to Rodriguez Capital. You've been paying me for almost 2 years. Thomas was staring at me with his mouth open. Gabby, why didn't you tell me? You never asked what I did for a living, I said simply. You assumed I was just a teacher. When I tried to explain my work, you'd smile and change the subject. You preferred the idea of a simple schoolteacher girlfriend. But $127 million? He looked genuinely shocked. I had no idea. Neither did we, Richard said, his commanding tone completely gone. Gabriella, Ms. Rodriguez, I apologize. We clearly made assumptions. You made assumptions that someone who teaches children and drives a modest car must be poor, I interrupted. You assumed that because I don't wear designer clothes or talk about money, I don't have any. You decided I was marrying up without ever asking about my life. Diane had tears in her eyes now. We were protecting our son. No, I said firmly. You were protecting your sense of superiority. You wanted me to sign a document declaring myself worthless so you could feel secure in your position above me. Margaret cleared her throat. For the record, my client's prenuptial proposal is in this folder. She slid another document across the table. It's quite different from yours. Richard opened it with trembling hands. This is extremely generous. It's fair, I corrected. It proposes that all assets acquired before marriage remain separate property, mine and Thomas's. Assets acquired during marriage are split equitably based on contribution and circumstance. There are provisions for children, for spousal support if needed, for the business interests of both parties to be protected. Both parties, Thomas repeated. Gabby, I don't have business interests. You own everything. You work for Hartwell Industries, I pointed out. That's a business interest worth protecting. And Thomas, if we marry, I plan to invest in expanding that business. I've analyzed your family's company. It has incredible potential that's being wasted by conservative management. With proper capital and strategy, Hartwell Industries could triple its value in 5 years. Richard was reading my proposed prenup with growing amazement. This section here, you're offering to invest $20 million in Hartwell Industries? If we marry, we're family. I invest in family. But the investment would be structured as a business loan with fair terms, keeping the company's ownership within your family while providing capital for growth. Why? Diane asked, her voice breaking. After how we've treated you, why would you do that? Because I love your son, I said simply. And because I believe in building up the people I care about, not tearing them down. Unlike you, I don't measure people's worth by their bank accounts. Thomas reached for my hand across the table. Gabby, I'm so sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have really listened when you talked about your work. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But you're young and you were raised in an environment that values appearances over substance. You can learn. Can we start over? He asked. Can I actually get to know the real you? I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see past the embarrassment and shock to the man I'd fallen in love with. Do you love me because you thought I was a simple schoolteacher who needed rescuing? Or do you love me for who I actually am? I don't know, he admitted. I thought I knew who you were. Now I'm realizing I didn't know anything. That's honest, at least, I said. Diane spoke up, her voice subdued. Gabriella, what happens now? With the mortgage, with the wedding, with everything? The mortgage continues as normal, I said. Your payments are current and the terms are fair. As for the wedding, I looked at Thomas. That depends on whether we can build a real relationship based on honesty instead of assumptions. And the prenup? Richard asked quietly. I stood up, gathering my things. Take both prenups. Read them. Think about what they say about how we view each other. My version protects both of us while assuming we're partners building a life together. Your version assumes I'm a threat to be neutralized. We were wrong, Richard said, standing as well. Completely wrong. Gabriella, I apologize. We judged you based on superficial observations and our own prejudices. That was inexcusable. It was, I agreed. But Mr. Hartwell, you should know, I would have signed your prenup. Everyone stared at me. Even knowing how one-sided it was? Margaret asked. Yes. Because I don't need Thomas's money. I never did. I was marrying him for love, not for access to the Hartwell fortune. Your prenup would have protected me just as much as it protected you. It would have proven that my motives were pure, but you didn't sign it, Diane observed. No. Because you needed to learn that worth isn't measured in dollars. You needed to understand that the woman you were dismissing as a gold digger actually holds your financial future in her hands. You needed to be humbled. Richard smiled slightly. Mission accomplished. Good. I headed for the door, then turned back. Thomas, you have my number. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about who we both are and what we both want from marriage, call me. Until then, the wedding is postponed. Gabby, wait, Thomas started. No. You've spent 2 years dating a version of me you invented in your head. Take some time to decide if you want to know the real me. That's going to require effort, curiosity, and seeing me as an equal rather than a project to rescue. I walked out of the Hartwell estate, the estate I technically held the mortgage on, with Margaret beside me. That was magnificent, Margaret said as we reached my car. Though I still think you should have let me tell them about the other properties. Other properties? Other properties? Rodriguez Capital owns mortgages on 3 other Greenwich estates, including the one owned by Diane's sister. You basically hold notes on half their social circle. I laughed. Let's keep that information in reserve. They've had enough shocks for one day. What are you going to do about Thomas? I unlocked my Tesla, the one I usually parked a block away from his apartment so he wouldn't see it. I'm going to wait and see if he's capable of growth. If he can look past his assumptions and actually see me. If he can. And if he can't? Then I'll move on. I'm not interested in being someone's charity case or their trophy wife. I'm interested in a partner who values me for who I actually am. My phone buzzed as I drove away. A text from Thomas, I'm an idiot. Can we talk? Really talk? I smiled and typed back, tomorrow. Coffee shop on Main Street. 10 a.m. And Thomas? Come prepared to ask questions about my actual life, not the life you assumed I had. His response was immediate, I will. I promise. And Gabby? I'm sorry. For not seeing you. For not asking. For being exactly what my parents raised me to be. Awareness is the first step, I typed. See you tomorrow? I put my phone away and drove toward my actual home, a 3-bedroom condo in Stamford with water views, underground parking, and a home office where I managed a $340 million private equity firm while wearing yoga pants and volunteering at elementary schools. They'd called me a gold digger who brought nothing to the marriage. They hadn't realized I owned the gold mine. And maybe, just maybe, they'd learned something about judging people based on appearances rather than character, about worth versus wealth, about the difference between having money and being valuable. Tomorrow, I'd find out if Thomas had learned the same lesson. And if he hadn't? Well, I'd built an empire from nothing once before. I could certainly find a partner who valued me for more than my bank account, or lack thereof. Either way, I'd be fine. I'd always been fine. They just hadn't bothered to notice.